online environment. And I think that's, of course, so vital right now because a lot of us are teaching strictly online. And so the biggest thing is trying to build that community, build that the same kind of circle that we get in an in-person setting. And there's some ways to do that we're going to talk about. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that MAA does record this webinar, so it will be shown later. They are going to distribute it, will be posted. So just make sure that anything that's, once we start the recording, and I'll say when we're starting it, anything that's said or asked will be included in that webinar. And during this webinar, feel free to use the chat function. You are automatically muted, but please feel free to use chat. Grace from MAA is going to be monitoring the chat. So if I don't see it, then she will kind of interrupt me. And if you have questions as we go, please feel free to ask. And we wanted to make sure that everyone's being respectful to each other and being open to those new ideas and everything as we do this. Feel free again to ask questions as we go throughout. And then we'll also have time at the end. So if you want to save your questions for the end, that's all right as well. We can have a little chat and kind of open it up to discussion at the end as well. So Grace, if you want to go ahead and start the recording.
Yep, we're recording.
All right, so again, this is building community in a remote online learning environment. My name's Ambika Silva. I'm on the StatPREP leadership team. I'm also a 2-year community college instructor at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita. And I've been teaching online for a little over a year and teaching hybrid for several years. So this is something that I'm familiar with, but of course I'm always learning and looking forward to learning from you all as well. So let's jump right in. What's the best way to build community online? And for me, the short answer is humanize your course. And this can be done by doing more thoughtful instructor to student interaction, as well as incorporating more student to student interaction. And I'm going to talk about both of them and different ways to do that. So the first one is creating a welcoming online class. So this is from the instructor to the student. How do we create a welcoming online class? And when we walk into a face-to-face classroom, it can be intimidating. You know, we walk in, are people smiling? And this could be a classroom or any situation, a meeting. Does everyone know everyone? Is anyone trying to help me? You know, so walking into a classroom can be intimidating, same as walking into an online classroom. And so when we're walking into an online class, you want to make students feel welcome by establishing your own presence, your instructor presence right away. So this could be done as soon as they enter the class. You have something at the top that kind of does that. This can also be done with some sort of orientation letter or in a syllabus. So looking down here, it says, welcome to Introductory Statistics. I'm Ambika Silva, your instructor for the semester. I love statistics because we can explore data in a practical and meaningful way. I also love my 2 kitties, my stats teaching husband, be sure to email me and not him, and too many geeky and nerdy topics to list. So it's a short little thing, and I include my picture here, but I wanted to impress on a few things here. Be excited for the course. So we do the same thing in our classroom. I want to show my students that I'm excited for the material that I'm about to teach them. And so it's good to convey that to them with writing or a video. So I'm doing this in writing, but of course this can be done in a video as well. Personalize it. Show students that there's someone behind the screen. It's not just words on a page. It's showing that I'm a human too, and this is what I'm into, or this is what I like. And it really makes it makes a personal connection right away for the student. And kind of going on the personalize is showing your face. And showing your face is really important, both with pictures and with video. When I first started teaching hybrid or online, I didn't want to show my face when I was doing videos. And now I show my face all the time because I know that students want to see it. They want to see it. I can convey my my enthusiasm a little bit better. It shows that we're a face instead of just the screen. And it gives students confidence to show their own faces if you're doing like synchronous meetings. So I pulled this just because we're talking statistics, so I wanted to show some data. I pulled this from a blog, and they asked students, how comfortable are you showing your face on camera? And 45 students in the class answered, and so you can see there's a wide variety, but about a quarter of our students aren't comfortable or very uncomfortable showing their face. And so you can talk on your first day if you're holding synchronous meetings about why you're doing that. You want students to get to know each other, feel comfortable with each other. You're showing your face, you want to see each other, you want to see their expressions. And so it's good to kind of recognize that students may not be comfortable doing it as well, but give them reasons why you want them to do it if you're holding like synchronous meetings in Zoom or such. So the next thing I want to talk about from instructor to student is communicate, and in fact, over communicate. And so when you over communicate, it's a way for us to stay informed and to stay socially connected. Online learners need those reminders. They need reminders for deadlines. You want everything in writing so that students can see exactly very clearly what you're asking for. And you can do this via announcements, emails, or some sort of other platform, social media, whatnot, to keep your students engaged and informed. You want to say it more than once and be prepared to be frustrated. The old thing for instructors to say is, it's in the syllabus, right? And now I say, it's in the announcement. And I can't tell you how many times I've put out an announcement saying something about something that's due or something that I need from them or whatever, and 20 minutes later I'm getting an email about that very thing. So it's good to remind students to look at announcements and get them used to looking at announcements, because that's going to be the best way to get in touch with them and to give them those kind of important information for the class. So I want to dive a little deeper in announcements. And I say announcements, but this of course can be emails or social media or wherever you're doing to communicate with your class. But announcements really help us remind students of due dates, upcoming events. And you'll see in this one that I posted here that it says week 14 open. And this is the one of the many times that I probably discuss week 14 because I'll remind them again, hey, are you working on week 14 still? Or hey, it's due tomorrow night, or it's due tonight. I don't want to spam them, but I certainly want to make sure that I'm doing announcements regularly so that they can see that I'm thinking about them, and it's a little reminder as well. It also, with announcements, it shows students that we're there for them. So in this announcements, I'm reminding students that I have office hours. I give them the link. It's a short little announcement, so not much to it or anything. And I say, if I have questions or you just want to say hi, feel free to drop in anytime during that time. When we're talking about language and announcements, you don't want to make it too formal. You want to make sure that it sounds like it's reaching out to them, but you're also being informative as well. I also use announcements to give overall feedback on assignments. And this is really great because it can, if you're grading a quiz or something that, you see the same recurring questions wrong over and over again, or parts wrong over and over again, this is a great way to kind of blast to everyone, hey, this is what I noticed, you guys did a great job, but here are some things that I want you to focus on. And this is good because even if they got it right in that, maybe it's a good reminder for them to read it, even though they might have gotten it right. So it's a good way to kind of get all your thoughts out of how they did on the assignment. And the last thing that I like to use announcements for to create that kind of bond between students is to bring in authentic news, articles, whatever's happening in relative to the topics that we're doing to involve my learners. So in this case, you can see the date was February 25th. So it was right as the pandemic was starting to come to light. And so I gave them a link on some up-to-date stats that would always kind of keep updating, saying, hey, it's not a homework or anything, but you might appreciate it. And I had quite a few students email me and say they really appreciated that, and then they also were able to share it because stats is our thing, so it was good for me to kind of show them something because stats is kind of at the forefront of all of this. So other ways to communicate is online office hours. In online office hours, you can have real-time conversations, stay connected with students, and I like using online office hours to also get a feel for how students feel about the class. How's the pace going? Is the communication good? How are they talking to other students? And just kind of get a one-on-one kind of feel for them as well, after I answer all their questions, of course. If you're finding, yes.
Oh, sorry, we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
What does panic in all caps stand for?
Oh, it's an acronym that I use for them to do confidence intervals. So P stands for parameter, A stands for assumptions, the name of the analysis, the type of test or interval or whatever it is, and then conclusion. So it's a way for students to kind of have all those steps where I don't have to ask, now tell me this and this and this, right? So it's a way for them to do a full confidence interval analysis and give me everything that I need. And I find with acronyms, it's easier for them to understand, to remember.
And follow-up question to that, I equals interpretation, question mark?
I was interval. And then the interpretation comes in the conclusion, the C for conclusion.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so if you're finding that students aren't attending your office hours, and sometimes you'll see that because, you know, a lot of times students take online courses because they don't have the time to, with work and everything, or you just happen to not be available when they're available. So, but there's a few kind of tricks that I think that you could incorporate. You could call them online tutoring instead of online office hours. And that might encourage them to go, oh, okay, I can come online for tutoring instead of just talking about specific things. Or be clear in your announcements on what office hours are for. This is where you can, you know, show me questions, you know, you can share your screen and, you know, we can go over specific things that you've done and that sort of thing. You can also vary the time and days. So do some at night, do some at morning, you know, vary the different days that you're doing. And then you can also poll your students to see in general what works for them. Are they night people? Are they morning people? That sort of thing. Or even go one step further and have students schedule time blocks with them, with you. And so there's various ways to do that depending on your LMS and what you're using, but you can have students sign up with you. I see things popping in the chat. Grace, is there some questions?
I was answering a question about the all panelists and attendees field and switching that to line over from, instead of saying all panelists, to all panelists and attendees.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. If you're holding synchronous meetings, a good way to kind of get a feel for your class, a lot of times if we're in face-to-face, we can read their faces, we can ask questions, right, that sort of thing. It's a little bit harder online. And so if you're doing asynchronous meetings, it's really good to conduct check-ins or check for understandings either at the beginning, at the end, or both, or as you go, to get a feel for what they're feeling. And that could be either about the material or just how they're feeling in general. You can ask them, how are they feeling with the pace of the class, or how are they feeling with this online tool I just, you know, incorporated last week, things like that. So a couple of free options is Kahoot and Poll Everywhere. Kahoot has ones where it's like a quiz and you can have them answer, you know, so it could be survey based, or it could be content based and see how if they're understanding what we did, let's say last time. Poll Everywhere is polling. Poll Everywhere has something cool. If you're teaching an online or remote class and you think you have students from all over, Poll Everywhere has a cool feature where you can say where they're from and you can see like on the map where everyone is. And just this summer, I had someone in Oregon, I think I had someone in Florida, someone was in China, I think one of our international students had gone home. So it's kind of interesting seeing where everyone is. So that might be kind of fun to incorporate into the class as well. And then word cloud generators. There's free word cloud generators as well. And then you can always use like Google Docs or something to kind of generate a list, and then you can copy and paste it into a word cloud. There may be other things that do it automatically that I'm unaware of. If you do, let me know, that you can do it that way, all in one type thing. I always like to give free resources, but I do want to give a little shout out to this one that I've just started using. It's called TypeItIn. It's a one-time fee. I think the lowest right now is like $21, $22-ish. But it allows you to give feedback. So you can see on the right here, it says TypeItIn. It's got all these kind of buttons here, and it allows you to insert feedback. So like things that we would repeat, like in the bottom here, it says, in the parameter, we don't address the sample of 38 cars. It should be all cars, same for the conclusion. I don't want to have to write that every time if I was grading an on-paper test. And even online, copying, pasting, you know, I used to go back and forth between a Word documents because I want to give students some really good feedback. But this way gives me a way that I can push a button and it floats it into there. And so I can give students meaningful feedback and quickly. And so it's changed the way that I grade, and it's wonderful. And maybe if people are interested, I can model that after we're done with everything. But it's a really cool tool. So from the student to student perspective, to humanize our course or to create community is, of course, discussion boards. And so discussion boards is a huge topic, huge thing. And we're going to go into a few different things with discussion boards. I love asynchronous discussions for a few reasons, but the one biggest thing is that it allows time for my introverted students to reflect and give thoughtful answers and to take part in these conversations. When we're holding face-to-face classes, a lot of times we have little, you know, we have a few people that dominate conversations, and I love that vibrant conversation we have in class, but sometimes they can take over the conversation, and some of our students need that time to reflect, and this gives them time to think about what they're going to say rather than having to respond. And so it gives them a voice where they wouldn't have had it always in a in-person setting.
Hey, Ambika.
Yes.
Question. Is this when you're grading things submitted to the LMS?
Say it one more time.
Is this when you're grading things submitted to the LMS? Oh,
You
that
mean
was
for TypeItIn?
Yeah, that was for the previous thing.
TypeItIn you can do anywhere. So with LMS, if you're doing it in a Google Doc, if you're doing it anywhere. And I can model it now if you guys want to, or we can do it at the end. Yeah, let's do it at the end, but I will model it so you can see it because I think it's super cool. But you can anywhere that you're doing it. So whatever platform you're doing, whatever LMS you're doing, it just does it for you. Wherever you can type it'll work. So it's not specific to anything. So when I do discussion boards, the very first discussion is introduce yourself. Hey, this is what who I am and what I do and everything, and my major, things like that. But in that first discussion, I also have clear rules and netiquette as part of it. So that I want them to read the rules, read the netiquette, and make sure that they're being mindful of like what I'm expecting. So for me, I require 1 post, 2 replies, and I don't let them see their first post. I don't let them see any posts until they do their first post. So they can't go looking at what everyone else did and then give their answer type thing. And so going over that from the beginning is really good. I also don't let them edit. That's because my LMS allows me to, but if yours doesn't, then then that's okay. But whatever rules that you do have, make sure you do that in that first discussion. One thing when I first started doing discussion boards, I thought, I'm going to let it be organic. They're going to talk, and I'm not going to put too many rules on it. And I found very quickly that even if I have prompts, I would get 2 sentences as a response. I would get, a couple of bullet points, that sort of thing. And so then the next time I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I say I want at least 6 sentences, or I want 10 sentences, or your replies have to be this long, or anything like that. Be clear on that because, of course, students don't do optional. And as time progresses, you'll see that they start writing more, but you want to be clear on those rules from the get-go.
Hey, Ambika.
Yeah.
Question, do you keep the entire class, say 28 students, in one giant discussion, or do you create smaller discussion groups? And this person is thinking maybe 8 to 10 in one.
I know people who've done it either way. I do it with all of them because I want them to see everyone's posting, because especially when we do stats topics, I want them to be able to see everyone's. But I know a lot of online instructors who do like to do it in little groups because they want it to be more more intimate, like more, you know, a smaller group so that they're able to just talk within each other. I haven't had a problem with doing the full class, but certainly, yeah, breaking it up into groups is good if you want them to continue conversations. Okay, so now the question comes, what to have discussion topics on. And I do two things in my stats class, when in any class really. And the first one is on the affective domain. And the affective domain includes addressing how individuals deal with things emotionally, such as feelings, motivations, and attitudes. And there's been a lot of research on that, on how the affective domain does play a role in how learners learn and how well they do in classes. And so it's really good to address that, especially in a math class, and especially in an online or remote learning math class, where there can be a lot of stress around doing math in general and then doing it online, especially now where a lot of them may not have chosen to do an online or remote learning class. And then I also do several things that are content specific for statistics, articles, commercials, news, things like that, just so that there's kind of the affective domain, which is kind of a break from our content, which students really appreciate. And then I'm still having some focus on the content that we're actually doing. So I wanted to dive into a couple of the different types of topics that I've done, both in the affective domain and in the content specific. And the first one here is on growth mindset. And growth mindset comes around an article by Carol Dweck, and I have the link here. And of course, I will be providing this PowerPoint will be made available, so you'll have all these links as well. So this article talks about growth mindset. Now, you can have students read the article. I also have them watch a video. So there's a little video, it's a few minutes long, that I want students to watch as well. And you can see here, I circled, I'm really glad that Professor Silva shared this video with us. I was leaning more towards a fixed mindset, but after watching the video, my whole perspective changed. And so growth mindset is about the feeling that a student feels that they can overcome something that they may be struggling with. And so if they're saying, I can't do stats, it's not I can't do stats, it's I can't do it yet, and I need to work harder for it, I need to train a little bit harder for it. And so this brings up really great discussions, and we do it early on, and a lot of times with the other affective domain activities or discussions, they will refer back to this one. So this is kind of a good one to do early on in the semester. The next one I wanted to show is this one. I call it Silver Spoon because he talks about why he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. This is Lou Holtz, who was a football coach, and this is a graduation speech. And this is one of my favorites. This comes later in the semester for me and my list of discussion topics. I do one or two every week. And usually one stats and then one affective domain, so I kind of have that balance. And so this one I wanted to focus on for a couple things. When you're doing discussion posts, when you're grading them, and I grade all of these, it's really good to ask a few things to make sure that they actually watch the video. So with, like, for instance, with the growth mindset, I asked them, in the video, there was a quote from a movie. What was that quote? And so if they hadn't watched the entire video, they wouldn't have seen that it was a Batman Begins quote, and they wouldn't have told me what it was. So with this one, there's a couple questions that I can easily look at to make sure that they've done it. And then I'm also having something that's going to be unique to them. So something that they can respond to. So it can be their opinion on something. It could be their personal, like a personal story that connects with them. And I always tell students to make sure, feel free to share as much or as little as they want. They don't have to get super personal. So I want to make sure that's clear to all of them. I want you to be comfortable with what you're sharing, but they are going to be sharing some things with each other. But I wanted to also focus in on this one. This was the student's first one. And you notice that they said in here that it made them tear up a bit, if I'm honest. And theirs is not uncommon, especially for this one. I've had a few students who say every semester, this one made me really emotional, or this one made me tear up. And it's not uncommon for students to open up, especially towards the end of the semester, which this is. And it's really a testament, I think, to that community that I've built over the entire semester, because they're able to be honest and they're comfortable talking to each other and sharing with each other, something like that. And I think that's really interesting to see as the progression goes throughout a semester. So let's dive into a couple of stats topics. And the first one I always love is the Abriva Commercial. And Abriva Commercial, you'll see it, and I put a YouTube link, but it forces, I put a screenshot, and you'll see at the bottom here, it says median healing time is 4.1 days, 25% of users healed in 2.5 days. So it teaches, one, for students to look at the fine print. And a lot of times students will have to watch this several times, and I'll get comments in the discussion saying, I thought it was a commercial, so I was waiting for the actual video to come because I thought it was like a YouTube commercial, not actually what I wanted them to see. Then once they realized that it's what I actually wanted them to see, then they started looking for the fine print. So this one, even at the end of the semester, they refer back to this one and say, this changed the way that I look at everything, to look at fine print, to really analyze what they're telling us. Now, more than that, that line, just one line at the bottom, has so many loaded questions when it comes to stats. We can have discussions about the shape of the data. Why is the median given and not the mean? What does that 2.5 represent? And so in their discussions, I want them to make those connections that, well, they're giving the median because either it's skewed or there's outliers. So that's why they're probably given the median and not the mean. And maybe that means that the shape is skewed. Which way would it be skewed? And we can have those discussions as well. That the 2.5 represents the Q1, the quartile 1. And so these are one things that I'd love for them to see as they're doing this and having those discussions. That doesn't always happen, right, with discussion boards. And so if you're doing a discussion, I don't tend to interject because I don't want to disrupt their flow of what they're talking about, because I want them to talk to each other. But at the end, after it's due, after I've graded it, maybe then we can do an announcement and say, you guys just did this announcement. This is what I wanted you to get from it. And you can kind of like have that kind of closure. Or you can talk about it during a synchronous meeting and have that discussion the way we just did. The second one, I like commercials. And I'll preface with this that I like commercials and showing things because it's what they're going to see. I want them to know things that they're going to see in life. And one of it is media, and what are they going to see when they're watching TV or doing things on the internet. So again, this is a commercial. If you haven't seen it, they're dancing in bed and everything. But again, I have this screenshot. And at the bottom, it says, compared to a placebo or no treatment, use as directed for occasional sleeplessness, et cetera, et cetera. So this can incite a lot of good discussion about, was it an experiment or observation, and does this convince you? Now again, students will start talking, maybe they're not hitting all the notes that I want them to, but a lot of times they'll say, well, there was a placebo involved, it was probably an experiment. Not often do I see them talking about, is this convincing? So maybe that's something I need to clear up when we do a synchronous meeting or in a announcement if it's not synchronous. You can say, is this convincing? So Advil PM compared to a placebo. Well, placebo is, right, no treatment, so it's Advil PM, better than nothing. Is that convincing us, right? Or what could we have done better to make a better comparison? So these kind of things can really incite a lot of discussion. The last one is a true car commercial. And you'll notice that beautiful normal distribution on the screen. And again, there's a link for the whole commercial. But this is great because it talks about normal distributions, whether a person gets a good deal. So that 38,061, was that a good deal? Was it a great deal? Should they buy it? So it can have these great conversations about that as well. The next thing I want to talk about for student to student is encouraging group work. And to encourage group work, I there's a few ways to do it. And the first one is these ungraded discussion boards. All the discussion boards that we just talked about, all those topics are graded. I'm looking for specific things. I'm making sure they respond to at least 2 people, all the things that I made clear at the beginning of the semester. So this discussion board would be an ungraded water cooler or coffee house or whatever you want to call it, that is just for students to talk. And so this is a way for them to just talk and get to know each other, and just chit chat. And especially now, sometimes they need that kind of forum, or they can ask each other questions. Hey, is anyone working on homework 12 or whatever it is? And can anyone kind of, want to meet to go over it type thing? So they can start forming study groups as well. But I want to make sure that that's available for them. And the other thing is I say encourage group projects. You can definitely force group projects and make students get into groups of however size and that sort of thing. For me, I didn't want to force group projects. I know that a lot of online students are doing it because they want to be flexible, they like working on their own, and I want to be respectful to those students' choices as well. But I do want to encourage them to work with each other with a little bit of extra credit. So I've done it both ways. And when I didn't do any extra credit, there was a lot of solo projects. I just recently started giving extra credit. So I'll say 10% extra credit on the project if they have a group of 4, 5% extra credit if they have a group of 3. And surprise, surprise, there was a lot more group projects. And so that was nice because they were working together and they were using extra credit as the reason, but they were still working together and getting their projects done. And 10% extra credit was really only like 4 points. And so it's not too many. So whatever you want to give as extra credit, it doesn't have to be a lot, but we all know students are going to work really hard for that 2 points of extra credit. And so these are some group reflections, and I took these from my summer class just because they just ended and I was just grading them last week, so it's fresh on my mind. So I just wanted to give a few reflections that they said. And so this one says, this was a really fun project to work on because working together with our classmates, even in an online setting, gave us a small sense of normalcy in the midst of this pandemic. And so they talk about using Zoom and how they found it interesting and that sort of thing. But I love that they said that it gave them a small sense of normalcy and that interaction, that contact with each other. And that's about building that community. Here's another one. This one says, this project was very interesting because it was the first time that we all had to work 100% online in a group setting, having never met face-to-face. So it's, again, a learning curve for them. We're all learning how to do Zoom and meetings and that sort of thing. It's great to have students learn that as well and have them work around it. Now, I've talked to some people and said and been asked, like, why, do I make them do certain platforms, or how do I encourage them to do it? And I don't, but you certainly can say, hey, try this, try Google Docs to do this, and you can kind of model some of it. I've kind of let them kind of figure it out on their own and haven't had any issues. But you certainly can if you want them to do something, especially if you want to see their group activity, then you can do something with that. And so at the end of the semester, I have 2 discussion boards that kind of close up everything. And one of them is, what's your favorite? And one of them is, thanks for the memories.
Hey,
and so,
Ambika?
Sure.
So sorry, just before we get away from group work completely, question, do you have them complete peer evaluation for group work?
Not for group work, but I have done it for projects. And so I'll assign groups. So I use Canvas as my LMS. I can't speak to other LMSs, but there is an easy way to say peer review. And so you can assign randomly peer review. So I can say, oh, I'm going to give you guys 3 projects to look at, and then make them write 2 comments on it, or have them write 1 positive feedback and 1 constructive criticism feedback, something like that. I like doing that because it kind of sometimes helps me see something, like if they're like, oh, there was a little mistake on this one part, it's easy for me to identify it as I'm grading it. So I'll see those comments there. And in my LMS, I can do that anonymously, and it's really easy to set up that way. So you can do it that way, or you can, of course, do, if you're meeting synchronously, do it as a, like they could do something like this, right, where they have a PowerPoint, they're talking through it, and you can do like an oral presentation as well. So you can definitely do that.
Oop, another one. I'm wondering if question was more about whether group members evaluate contribution of other members.
Oh, that, so I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Yes, I've done that as well, where you have students grade each other. So you have a group grading. I've done it where you rate each person from 1 to 10. So let's say I rated my group mate an 8 out of 10. Let's say we got a 95% on the project, but then the group mates have a, let's say, an average of an 8 out of 10 for whatever reason. Then I can take like 80% of the points that they earned to give them a lower grade than that. And so let's say that someone wasn't, they only gave, let's say everyone gave them a 5 out of 10. And so I can dock it, you know, accordingly based on what the others have said. Now, a lot of times when I do group grading, they're like 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, everyone's fine. And a lot of times if they have 8 or higher out of 10, I kind of ignore it. If they're being honest and saying 8 or 10 or 9, then I'm like, okay, they put in some work. It's when it's a little bit lower. If everyone says that this one group member has not performed to the highest, then I can definitely dock that person. And you can have that written in a rubric. If you do that, I would definitely have it written very clearly in the rubric on how you're calculating that out, though.
And now we've got, yep, but when a slacker is clear, especially because of original extra credit offered, this is important.
Yes, and so you can, I just dealt with this semester for that. And I have some colleagues who have done firing a group member, and they have a process for firing a group member. So you can have the entire group fire someone from the group, and then there's a process for that as well. And so if the rest of the group says, hey, you know, Johnny's not doing his work, we all want him out of the group, then there can be a process involved for that. And then Johnny would have to do his own projects, so that sort of thing. So when I had a group member, you know, I had a group that said that this past semester, this summer, I said, that's fine. If you want to remove them from the group, please make sure that you're emailing them and trying to communicate with them. And then, you know, let me know of what was happening, and then I can contact them as well, that sort of thing. And it ended up working out. They were able to get a hold of them and work through the project. Other questions on that? Group projects can be super hard, especially online and face-to-face for that matter, with those group dynamics. The best thing I can say is to make sure to have very clear standards and things of what to do and how to do it. So like if you're going to have the fire a member or the group grading, make sure they know, and make sure they know how it's going to be calculated, so that they know how it's going to affect them at the end.
Not seeing any other questions.
Okay, cool.
On that.
So back to this ending of the semester in terms of these kind of thanks for the memories and what's your favorite. I do what's your favorite just because I give so many. I give 2 a week, and so there's quite a bit to choose from, and it's really interesting to see the responses. Some of them you see pop up quite a bit, and you could tell they were a little bit more impactful, but it's amazing. There is quite a few out, because I always think, well, maybe this one's not, but no, there's people that respond that really liked that one. So it's interesting just to kind of see what people say. And then for the thanks for the memories, I tell them to thank each other. I tell them not to thank me, but sometimes they do that as well. So this one, I wanted to thank so-and-so and so-and-so for making the project experience a lot easier. And they were very cooperative online. I was honestly really nervous to create a project on distance-based learning, but they made it great. I'd also like to thank so-and-so and so-and-so, and these were different people, for their responses to my discussion post. Thank you for leaving kind words and comments or just encouragement. And so they're so thankful to each other at the end of the semester for that kind of community that we've built up throughout the semester. And you can see at the end, hope you all have a great and easy fall semester and wish you the best. I tell them 6 sentences or 10 sentences or whatever, but you can see how much they actually write. They write quite a bit at the end. Not all of them, but quite a bit of them do like to write quite a bit for this. I appreciate my group. I appreciate the thoughtful posts. A lot of them are just really thankful for the open space that they can have to talk to each other, and like just being open and honest with each other. So at the end here it says, thank you to me for all the amazing discussions along the way, which were full of encouragement and helpful lessons to help us understand how to cope with struggling and feeling stuck. I feel like I definitely learned a lot of lessons that I will continue to apply in my life from this class. And again, I took this from my class that is just ending right now. So this was posted like maybe a couple days ago, because it was fresh in my head, but this is definitely recurring, right? That they're so thankful for it, that you can tell how much they're appreciating each other, especially now that we're in pandemic. In the pandemic, they're definitely having this way to kind of respond to each other. So let's use it, get them used to talking to each other and getting that community built as we go on. So in conclusion, I wanted to say that creating this sense of belonging and community in an online or remote learning setting is absolutely critical. We want to have multiple ways for students to participate and respond, and we want to make sure that students aren't feeling isolated, especially in today's times. But having this not only helps the students feel connected, it helps us feel connected to them, but it also helps us get a better feel for where they're at in the class itself. So it's not just a screen, it's still a class, and it's still gonna not be the same as a face-to-face, but we can certainly try to make it as not what's the opposite of isolating, as together as we can through a screen. And so I think that it's really good to focus on this humanizing aspect, and everything else, you know, of course, all the other stuff that we have to do with the content, but this is going to make the class so much more enjoyable for you and for them. So I'd love to hear, thank you guys for all your questions along the way, but if there's questions, comments, ideas, we're all kind of navigating this remote learning. So I'd love to hear how you guys are all doing it. Before we get started on any other questions and everything, I just wanted to say thank you again to MAA for hosting this webinar, StatPREP for sponsoring it, and you guys for coming. My email's at the bottom. This will be posted, I'm assuming, Grace, at the StatPREP website.
Yep.
Okay, so it'll be posted there, and then I'll also make sure that my PowerPoint will be there as well. And I think I'll also try to include my list of discussion topics that or at least some of them that I've done in the past, if you're interested in those kind of discussions. So is there any other questions, comments, ideas? I'm going to stop share. So it says, thank you. I was planning to use regularly use breakout groups, but I'm fearing that they'll be too quiet based on PD, where we did just where instructors were quiet. I'm trying to figure out how to get them talking. So definitely with breakout groups, make sure you have, I would say, make sure you have like a plan. If you just say, hey, breakout and talk about, you know, about XYZ, they're not going to, they're going to be a little stuck. If you have guiding questions, kind of like the way that the discussion board was, like where it says this, right? I had some guiding questions of what they can answer, and then a question on how they're something a little bit more like where they can each respond to each other. Something like that might get them more talking. If you do an icebreaker, that might be really good as well, because it might kind of help them, or an icebreaker question, or 2 truths and a lie, something like that, where they can kind of just talk to each other, because it can be a little intimidating at first being online with all these people they don't know. So that might be a good idea as well. Colette, I'll do the type it in a second for sure. Can the water cooler group be a group meeting location virtually? Do students use this a lot, discussion board or room? You know, I haven't had a ton of activity in the water cooler coffee house. I'm looking for ways to kind of to get that a little bit more involved. Students don't tend to do optional, so if it's not graded, then they don't, right? So, but I like having that, at least it's there for them. I know some people have done it. Another thing that I did for projects was I made a separate one for just the project topics, and said, this is just if you want to work with a group. And so I gave all the list of project topics and said, if you want to form a group, start doing it in here. And that they did use quite a bit, especially because the extra credit for the project. And so they would go in, I went in there to check in, and they're like, hey, I'm interested in project topic 5. Anyone else interested? And then you'd get some responses so they can start like forming their groups. And then they took it offline via text or emails or whatever they're doing. But that gave them kind of like an open forum to just start that conversation. Even with guiding questions, no one wanted to talk first. And then phantoms, question mark. Okay, so with guiding questions with instructors, no one wanted to talk first. Again, maybe just by setting those, I think it has to be, if you're doing it from the beginning, we're not used to doing this kind of setting and talking. So maybe people are a little more timid. I don't know if I have another answer for that. You know, if you start doing it maybe all together, or something simple, talk about your animals. People love talking about their pets or their favorite movie or whatever. Have something that maybe is like an icebreaker, right? Rather than something like deep, you know, or something about the content. Thank you. I was able to catch the end of your talk. You're welcome. Discussion group rubrics. So I keep the discussion rubric kind of open. I just kind of, they're worth like 5 points each, and I'd give 3 points for their initial post, including all the content, and then 2 points for each of, like 1 point each for their responses. So if they didn't answer some of the questions, they didn't catch the Batman quote when we're doing effective domain or things like that, then I'll take off a point, that sort of thing. Or if they're not writing enough, then I'll take off a point. And I always write in there why, right? Didn't respond to 2, and, you know, or didn't write enough, or didn't answer this question, things like that. Phantoms is like panic. So phantoms is the acronym for our hypothesis testing. So parameter, hypotheses, assumptions, name of the analysis, that sort of thing. Let's see, what else? Beth, I like it. Icebreakers. So some fun icebreakers to do on Zoom. Udani, using TV shows or Netflix shows as starter, right? If you haven't caught Netflix's, what was it? 100 People, that's got some cool discussion things that could be used. The getting to know you discussion. Yeah, so at the beginning, that very first one where I had like the netiquette and that sort of thing, it was the getting to know you discussion. And I asked them things like, you know, tell me, you know, tell everyone about yourself, your major, what you're planning on doing, your career, that sort of thing. I've also added a few another one, which is what's your favorite TV show, podcast, book, right? Something like that. And I've noticed that once adding something like that they were able to respond to quite, they talk to each other about that. Not only that, but, you know, if they're like, oh, I really like Game of Thrones, and then someone's like, oh my gosh, I really like it too, that gives them a way to bond. So something with that, as soon as I added that question, I noticed that they definitely talk to each other a lot more in that first discussion. Yeah, the icebreakers again. So definitely icebreakers, and even icebreakers like especially at the beginning of the very first few. So you can do an icebreaker on the very first synchronous meeting, but I would even go further and say something little on a few meetings to get them to know each other, right? And kind of break that ice every time. I think that's total, or once a week, or whatever you're meeting. I think that would be really good to kind of, you know, get that conversation going. Okay, so I'm going to do is if there's more questions for sure, but I wanted to bring up TypeItIn. So let me share my screen again. All right, so if I have TypeItIn, and over here, you can see that it's kind of floating. And if I open up my PowerPoint, see how it floats right on top of it. And so I have tons of like little things, and then I can also switch it around into which quiz. So I make all of these, you make a new group, and then you can have these in. So let's say that this was, I'm here, and I wanted to put in this one. And you can see it automatically pops in, right? So this is the one that I used earlier. Or if I say, oh, you're on the right track, but there are some errors. And then I start clicking through, they did this, and it kind of just pops in there. So I can give that much feedback, right, in a very short time. And I'm doing this in PowerPoint, but it's really anywhere you go. So if you're in your LMS, if I'm in Google, right, I could just say Mew, right, and it'll pop in. So wherever you are, if you're in a Word document, so if you're doing like a Google Doc, then you can type it in there. If you're in like Canvas or another LMS that allows you to do quick feedback. So let's say as I'm grading, I usually do this first. And then if I'm doing something as I'm grading, I'm like, oh, this person's making that, I could do a new button. And then I can call it missing N. I'll just make it up. You're missing N. And then spaces, you could put enters, anything like that. And then I'm just going to close it. And then once I'm here, I can use it and use it all over again. So it's really great. I'm going to get rid of that because otherwise I'm going to be like, what is that later? So you're making buttons. So for this, so this was one quiz in particular, and then I have different exams, right? And then so all of these have different things that you're just punching it in. And so it's a really great way to kind of show that quick feedback and a lot of it, because again, you're typing the same thing over and over again. What I used to do was have like a Word document and just kind of copy and paste back and forth. And then of course you can still type in a little bit more personal stuff in there when you're doing it, but this kind of gives you a good way to give like some quick feedback. Yeah, so Felicia said, that's awesome. I did a cumbersome way with my Word doc. I'd cut and paste it with comments. I did that as well. And that's what I used to do. And I saved it in a Word doc. But I'm telling you, this what made it so much easier just because it's floating anywhere you go, right? And it kind of pops up. And it pops up and then you can, it's wonderful. I love it. And so you can have general stuff for like discussion boards, right? Hey, you didn't do 2 responses or whatever it is. But with the Word doc, I did that and I would just have to keep going back and forth. But this just made it so much easier. So Anu says, I've been using affected domain assignments for a few years. Have to thank Ambika for introducing me to this. I've been receiving good responses from students about these activities. Thank you, Anu. It's definitely changed a lot for my students as well. And it's not something that I like embraced right away, but when you start seeing how it affects the students, it's incredible. It really does create that community is what, you know, when they're able to share with each other. I do one on bullying towards the end of the semester because I want to make sure that they've established each other, right, and kind of gotten to know each other. And so when I do one on bullying, it can be really personal, and it's incredible what they say to each other, how supportive they are to each other, and that's building that community more than anything I ever could do, right? Is that they're talking to each other and getting that. getting that closeness. The 100 people, I want to say 100 people, 100 persons, it's on Netflix, and they do like experiments. And some of it's kind of good, and some of it's like, well, maybe there's some bias involved in this. But they do things like, are older people better dancers type thing? And so they'll 100 humans. Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. That's my husband, the stats instructor that I say in my introduction. Make sure you're emailing the right Silva. So yeah, 100 humans. It's really wonderful to kind of like talk about things and what they did. So check it out. If you haven't done it, it's kind of cool. Rupa says, Ambika, for my class posting announcement made a huge difference. You gave me this idea. Thanks a lot. You're welcome, Rupa. And remember, with announcements, at least in Canvas, and probably I would say for a lot of LMSs, if you're using a different LMS, you can schedule it to go off. So let's say today, I wanted to make an announcement for today and tomorrow, but I know tomorrow I'm going to be busy. You can set them to go off on certain times. So if I know that I want to remind them about assignments due on Wednesday, I can make the announcement today and have it delayed until that day or a certain time, that sort of thing. It's always good to, because like sometimes, at least for me, I have a billion things in my head that I'm like, oh, I want to get all this information out to them, but it's better for students to kind of have it spaced out. So I'll say, okay, I'll have this one go off today, this one maybe later today, this one tomorrow, that sort of thing. So it's good to kind of space them out as well. And again, it kind of keeps like them involved, like, okay, they're thinking about me, even though I wasn't there to send out the announcement. It's still, you know, gonna remind them that we're still here. Does anyone know about grouping by personality? So if I were to confidentially survey my students ahead of time and ask them about personality traits, I'm wondering how I might use their answers to make groups that are likely less fearful of talking. I might have to ask my social psychologist friends. I don't have a lot of information on that. If someone else does, then certainly type it out in the chat. My first thing would be like if you did the like a Myers-Briggs or something like that, and then maybe you can group them that way. If there's something like a quick little personality test that you can do, like True Colors I used to do, and that's kind of nice because it's 4 different colors, and then you can group them by that. So like orange were the very hands-on, green was the more methodical kind of thinking, that sort of thing. So those are a couple things that I'm familiar with, but if someone else has a better idea, then please write it in the chat. Is there any other questions, comments, things that you guys have noticed? I love all the conversations and all the things that people have been saying they've been doing or thinking of trying. I love hearing about that. Okay, so I'm not, oh, there. Sorry to swell, I'm thinking to dwell. Was the 100 humans to give ideas for icebreakers? No, 100 humans is more about like talking about experiments. So like experiments, you could do it as an icebreaker and say like, but I would also incorporate, especially after you talk about like experimental design, things like that, I would definitely incorporate that in. You could do it as an icebreaker as well, though I'm sure you can do it that way as well. But it's definitely got a stats slant to it in terms of that. So I would focus it around experimental design, that sort of thing. Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for coming again. It's been wonderful to hear from everyone and to hear what everyone's doing. I hope this was helpful to kind of see how to incorporate more humanity into our classes with math. It definitely can help our students feel more comfortable with it. Let's see, we have another question. Is your group divorce process like group members have to explain in writing the issues they encountered? They list the possible solutions they tried and how it worked and not worked. Yeah, so I mean, it's same thing with a face-to-face, right? Anytime I've done groups, there can definitely be group drama, right? And in a face-to-face, I would pull all the group members together and say, please explain to me what's happening, and we'll try to work it out if possible. So same kind of thing, maybe that could be done via email. Say, you know, if a group member comes up to me and says, you know, I'm having trouble with this person, then I would, you know, I said, you know, can you email me all your group members so it's all out there, right? So they're not saying, well, so-and-so is saying this and so-and-so is saying that. So nothing's behind the back. It's more of like, okay, here's all of us together. And then if I'm in the conversation as well, then I can see that they're not responding, right? That if this person is responding and saying, hey, so-and-so is not responding, and then 2 days later, that person is still not responding to emails, then at least I can see that as well. Now, you can be as involved or uninvolved as you want with that sort of thing. If you don't want to be part of the, I like how Yelda says it, group divorce process, you can definitely, you can say, this is up to you guys, you know, you can decide, I can remove, or, you know, so you can make sure you're clear, but it's kind of a learning process for sure, because there's definitely problems when you have groups, and especially online when people have different schedules. You know, sometimes it's just that they want to get it done on Friday and it's not due to the following week, so they weren't expecting to get it done on Friday type thing. So sometimes there's issues based around that as well. So the more we do them though, the better we get at it, right? As kind of like everything, but to deal with all that kind of group dynamics, we'll say. You're welcome, Mario. Since I'm a stats person, can you finish out the phantoms? You would, as far as N, T is test statistic. Yeah, so T is test statistic, O is obtain p-value, M is make a decision, so reject, fail to reject, and S is statement, so like the conclusion, but statement. And feel free, of course, to email me. I'd be happy to send you more information on that sort of thing. And I can put my email out here as well. It's in the PowerPoint, but if you have other questions, comments, if you wanted to know more about that, about the phantoms, then I can send you something so you can see what that is. You're very welcome. Any other questions, comments, things that have worked, haven't worked? Okay, so if no one else has questions, I'll stay a few minutes longer. You're welcome, everyone, for all the thank yous. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that everyone's here and we were able to have these conversations. And of course, feel free to reach out if you have questions, comments, anything. Be sure to email me. I'd love to hear from you. So I was a little late. What directions did you give about TypeItIn? I'm thinking TypeItIn. TypeItIn. So I kind of modeled it, and so the recording will be there, so you can kind of go over that again. But TypeItIn is a cool tool. It's like a macro, so that you can give like quick feedback, and it's a great way to, because especially we don't want to just give a grade. We want to give some feedback on what they're doing. So it's a great quicker way than having like a Word document. So I used to do it where Word document and then where I was grading, and I would just kind of go back and forth and copy and paste, and TypeItIn just made it a little bit more seamless, a little bit more just faster to grade so that I can give better feedback. I write the macro. It's typing, so it's just kind of, I had already written things out because I already done it with Word. So if you, it's the you pay for the TypeItIn, and then once you have that, then you create all the personalization. So it's not like a code or anything. You buy the product. You're welcome. Okay, well, thanks again, everyone. Again, I'll wait for a little longer to see if anyone has any other questions, but if we want to stop the recording, Grace, then I'm sure we can